There are moments in history when a nation reminds the world and itself who it truly is. Moments when patience, resolve, and quiet determination finally converge into action. On a warm night in May of 2011, while most of the world slept, the United States reached across borders, politics, and nearly a decade of unanswered grief to close one of the darkest chapters in modern history. This was not a moment of celebration born from violence, but of closure born from perseverance. It was the night America proved something its enemies had long hoped the world would forget. The United States does not abandon its promises, and it does not forget those who harm its people. For almost 10 years, Osama bin Laden existed as a shadow, unseen, unheard, but constantly present in the American conscience. His name was synonymous with loss, fear, and unanswered questions following the attacks of September 11, 2001. For millions of Americans, the pain of that day never fully faded. It lingered in memorials, in empty chairs at family tables, and in the quiet determination of a nation that refused to accept that justice could simply disappear into the mountains of the world. Presidents came and went. Wars were fought. And still the question remained, where was the man responsible? Finding him was never a matter of brute force. It was a test of patience, intelligence, and discipline, qualities that often define American strength more than raw power ever could. Over the years, bin Laden deliberately erased his digital footprint, avoiding phones, computers, and any form of communication that could be traced. He relied instead on a small circle of trusted messengers, believing this old-fashioned method would keep him invisible. What he underestimated was the quiet persistence of American intelligence agencies who spent years assembling fragments of information that, on their own, meant very little, but together told a story. The turning point came with the identification of one man, a courier believed to be one of bin Laden's closest confidants. First identified in 2007, this individual became the key to unlocking a mystery that had consumed the world's most advanced intelligence apparatus. American analysts followed him patiently, resisting the temptation to act too soon. By mid-2010, their efforts led them to an unexpected place, a quiet city called Abbottabad in Pakistan, far from the lawless border regions where many assumed bin Laden would hide. What they found there raised more questions than answers. The compound stood out immediately. Surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire, it was significantly larger than neighboring homes and strangely isolated from the modern world. There were no phone lines, no internet connections. Trash was burned rather than discarded. The man believed to occupy the top floor never left the property. From the outside, it appeared ordinary enough to avoid attention, yet unusual enough to quietly alarm those trained to notice patterns others miss. By early 2011, American officials reached a conclusion that would alter history. They had enough intelligence to believe, with high confidence, that Osama bin Laden was inside. What followed was not immediate action, but careful deliberation. The stakes were enormous. A mistake could destabilize an already fragile region, endanger American lives, or shatter international alliances. There were difficult questions to consider about sovereignty, legality, and political consequences. Above all, there was the responsibility to get it right. The decision-makers understood that this was not merely a mission. It was a defining moment for a nation still carrying the weight of September 11th. One of the most sensitive aspects of the plan was secrecy. The United States chose to proceed without informing Pakistani authorities in advance, fearing that even a small leak could compromise the operation. Only a handful of individuals within the U.S. government knew what was about to happen. This silence was not an act of arrogance, but of necessity. The success of the mission depended on precision, surprise, and trust in the men tasked with carrying it out. When the operation began, it unfolded with the kind of discipline rarely seen and even more rarely discussed. American forces moved with speed and professionalism, guided by years of preparation and unwavering focus. The objective was clear: confirm the presence of the target and bring a decade-long manhunt to its conclusion. Within minutes, the world's most elusive figure was finally identified, and the mission reached its decisive moment. The details of what happened inside the compound have been debated and analyzed ever since, but what is not disputed is the outcome. The search was over. Afterward, American officials took extraordinary steps to ensure certainty. The remains were transported to a secure location where DNA testing was conducted using samples from bin Laden's family. According to U.S. authorities, the results left virtually no doubt. What followed was a decision rooted not in spectacle, but in restraint. Bin Laden was buried at sea, a choice intended to prevent his grave from becoming a symbol or rallying point for future extremism. It was a quiet ending to a man who had thrived on attention and fear. As news of the operation reached the world, reactions were immediate and intense. In the United States, crowds gathered spontaneously, not to glorify violence, but to acknowledge closure. Flags were raised, silence was observed. For many Americans, it felt like the final exhale after holding their breath for nearly 10 years. Elsewhere, skepticism emerged. Questions were asked. Conspiracy theories spread. Some doubted the absence of photographs. Others questioned the legality of the mission itself. Those legal questions remain complex. International law does not offer simple answers in a world shaped by non-state actors and asymmetric warfare. Scholars continue to debate whether the operation should be viewed strictly as an act of war or as an extraordinary measure of self-defense. What is clear, however, is that the United States acted under the belief that it was protecting its citizens from an enemy who had already demonstrated his willingness to cause mass harm. In moments like these, history often moves faster than law, and nations are judged not only by statutes, but by responsibility. In the years since that night, the operation against Osama bin Laden has become more than a military success. It has become a symbol of patience over panic, intelligence over impulse, and resolve over fear. It reminded Americans and the world that justice does not always arrive quickly, but it can arrive decisively. The United States did not seek revenge. It sought accountability, and when the moment came, it acted with purpose. That night did not erase the pain of September 11th, nor did it bring back what was lost. But it did something profoundly important. It affirmed that even in a complicated and dangerous world, the United States remains committed to defending its people and honoring its promises. History will continue to debate the details, the legality, and the politics. But for many Americans, one truth remains unchanged. The long wait ended, and a chapter that began in smoke and sorrow was finally, quietly closed. For many Americans, the pursuit of Osama bin Laden was never just a military objective, it was personal. The attacks of September 11th were not distant historical events. They were lived experiences. People remember exactly where they were that morning, who they were with, and how the world seemed to change in a matter of hours. Airports became symbols of anxiety. Skyscrapers no longer felt invincible, and a generation grew up shaped by a sense that something precious had been taken away. The search for bin Laden became a quiet promise that this trauma would not be forgotten, no matter how long it took. What often goes unrecognized is how restraint defined much of that decade-long hunt. There were moments when incomplete intelligence could have justified action, when public pressure demanded swift results. Yet time and again, American leadership chose patience over impulse. This discipline reflected a deeper national value, the belief that justice must be grounded in certainty, not emotion. In an era dominated by instant reactions and constant media scrutiny, the decision to wait, observe, and verify was itself a demonstration of strength. Inside intelligence agencies, the hunt became a generational effort. Analysts dedicated years of their lives to a single question, knowing their work would likely never be publicly acknowledged. Information was debated, challenged, and re-examined. Every assumption was questioned. The compound in Abbottabad was not immediately labeled as bin Laden's hideout. It was treated as a possibility, one that required months of observation and internal disagreement before consensus was reached. This culture of skepticism, often invisible to the public, played a crucial role in preventing catastrophic mistakes. The location itself carried profound symbolism. Abbottabad was not a remote cave or a lawless frontier. It was a settled city, surrounded by order, routine, and normal life. That reality forced uncomfortable reflections about the modern nature of threats, how danger can exist quietly alongside normalcy, unseen by those not trained to look for it. For many Americans, learning that bin Laden had lived for years in such an environment challenged assumptions about where evil hides and reinforced the need for vigilance even in seemingly safe places. When the final decision was made, it was not framed as a moment of triumph, but of responsibility. The men tasked with carrying out the mission understood that history would judge not only the outcome, but the conduct. Every step was planned to minimize collateral damage, avoid unnecessary escalation, and preserve dignity, even toward an enemy who had shown none. This commitment to professionalism is often overlooked, yet it reflects a deeper military ethic that Americans have long taken pride in. The aftermath of the operation also revealed a rare moment of unity in an increasingly divided nation. Political differences faded briefly as Americans across generations recognized the significance of what had occurred. Veterans who had served in the years following 9/11 saw the moment as validation of sacrifice. Families who had lost loved ones felt a measure of closure. Younger Americans who had grown up knowing only a post-9/11 world witnessed a defining chapter of their national story reach its conclusion. International reactions varied, but within the United States, the meaning was deeply personal. The event was not framed as an end to terrorism, nor as a declaration of victory over an ideology. Instead, it was understood as accountability, a reminder that while justice may be delayed, it is not abandoned. This distinction matters deeply to American identity. The country has long struggled with the balance between power and principle, and moments like this test whether those principles endure under pressure. Years later, debates about legality, diplomacy, and ethics continue, as they should in any healthy democracy. Yet history often separates legal complexity from moral clarity. For many Americans, the operation reaffirmed faith in institutions that had been tested by war, controversy, and fatigue. It demonstrated that despite mistakes and missteps along the way, the United States remained capable of acting with purpose and precision when it mattered most. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of that night is what did not happen. There was no parade, no prolonged spectacle, no attempt to exploit the moment for fear or intimidation. Instead, the chapter closed quietly, almost solemnly. In choosing restraint over celebration, the United States denied its enemy the attention he had always sought. The silence that followed was intentional and powerful. In the end, the story of how America found Osama bin Laden is not just about a man or a mission. It is about a nation's memory, its patience, and its refusal to surrender to despair. It is a reminder that history is not shaped only by dramatic moments, but by years of quiet resolve that lead to them. And for a country that promised it would never forget, that night stood as proof that it never did.